following up on something I said the other day, which is that the um, nature of fascism is profoundly anti-national, in contrast to all its rather grandiose claims and appeals to crass romanticism. And I want to say that to start off with, because what I'm about to talk to with regard to Ukraine is directly related to fascism. And what I mean by anti-national is that the essence of a nation, the real content of a nation is the masses. The real content of any nation is the proletariat, the peasantry, if such a class exists in any particular nation, and to the petty bourgeoisie to an extent as well. But overwhelmingly, it's the proletariat and the peasantry. And that is what constitutes a nation, and that is the future of the nation, any nation. And therefore, any political movement that arises which seeks to hurl a nation back into being ruled by the current capitalist class, the comprador bourgeoisie, the wretched set of traitors and placemen who are the servants of the imperialists. Any movement or party that says that, or stands for that and wants to subjugate the proletariat, to restore the profitability of capital and subjugate the peasantry as well, anything that wants to do that is not only, of course, anti-worker, but it's also anti-national by definition, because what they're doing is they are hurling the nation, the great masses of the nation, back into submission, into subjugation, either under the boot heel of a dictatorship which is there to prop up a decaying mode of production in the form of capitalism, or to subjugate the proletariat on behalf of the imperialists. And that is what I mean by anti-national. And that is why, of course, fascism in all its many different varieties has to appeal to romanticism, to, shall we say, an imagined heroic past, to an imagined heroic elite which don't exist, to a great faith-based crusade, again based on mythology. Fascism is, of course, something which is predominantly in the past been an appeal directed at the petty bourgeoisie, who are, of course, a class which bounce between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie, and their political tendencies reflect that. And I would say also that the whole essence of fascism in that pre-World War II interwar era, whether it's Mussolini, whether it's Hitler, whether it's Franco, all appealing to these mythical ideas of the nation, all in actual fact profoundly anti-national. Because, of course, what Mussolini wanted to do was he was dressing up his blatant service to the Italian bourgeoisie, the rotten and wretched Italian bourgeoisie, who, having had the nation unified by the revolutionary nationalism of Garibaldi and Mazzini, were then only partially able to fully complete the unification of the nation and left large chunks of the nation underdeveloped. And when the workers and peasants started to rise, they turned to Mussolini's thug squads in order to deliver the nation back firmly into their hands, of course. Mussolini then spends 20 odd years trying various failed schemes to develop the productive forces further by hyper-exploiting the proletariat and the peasantry, privatizes large amounts of state assets, and then ultimately can only just about scrape out a victory in one imperialist war against the Abyssinians, now Ethiopia, and he had to use poison gas on them, then loses every war that he fights, fundamentally reflecting the unstable nature of his regime and also the decayed and rotten state of Italian capitalism. Hitler, of course, the notorious National Socialist, who libertarians have been saying is a socialist ever since then. You read anything that Hitler actually said, he's pretty clear on why they chose the name and also what it actually meant. Hitler is very clear that it's all his socialism is all based on essentially German mythology, and it's all about tying the proletariat and the peasantry to the German ruling class under the banner of this mythical German Volk. And this is what, of course, was the justification for all the things that Hitler actually got busy with, which is, of course, restoring the profitability of German capitalism by destroying all the institutions through which the proletariat used to politically and industrially find representation, and reducing the proletariat to borderline slave status in the factories under militarily imposed discipline. And of course, again, privatizing large amounts of state assets and handing over large areas of state operations to be run by the corporations under the fake banner of things like the German Labour Front, which, just as Mussolini did with these corporations, was all meant to be about unifying labour and capital, but was in actual fact about firmly establishing or re-establishing the dictatorship of capital over labour. And as for Franco, the great leader of the new Reconquista, of course, he killed plenty of workers, killed plenty of trade unionists, killed a lot of communists, and ultimately delivered Spain into the hands of the American bloc, where it has served as a loyal asset ever since. So fascism, waving its flag, screaming its mythologies, screaming its obscenities, what is it really all about when it comes down to it? Smashing and destroying the bargaining power and the political forces of the great masses of the nation in order to preserve the most parasitic, the most backward and the most rotten parts of the nation. That is fascism. And it's true whether it's the European fascists of the 30s, whether it's a character like Pinochet, or whether it's the Banderists in Ukraine today. Just look at what they have delivered Ukraine into. It's a slaughterhouse. It's a unending bloodletting that has gone on, as Steve says in the comments there, for 9 years. And that is what the great heroes of Ukrainian nationalism have delivered, just as 90 years ago these people were purely the advent of imperialism, albeit sometimes they're in the service of British imperialism, sometimes they're in the service of German imperialism, now they're just men in the service of American imperialism. And in the service of that imperial master, they were prepared to deliver Ukraine into the hell of German occupation and slavery and slaughter in the 40s. And now they're delivering Ukraine into slaughter and ownership by BlackRock and the various agencies of American imperialism in the 2020s. It is an unending horror designed only to prop up the most foul and parasitic elements of any nation. That is what fascism is. And so you can find no more anti-national force than a fascist, which is why he has to shout and scream so loud and get so hysterical and resort to such violence, because they're trying to deny an awful lot of objective truth.